So what's your issue?
Oh, hold whoa. Let me mute the stream because okay.
Yeah.
All right, it's good.
All right. So what's your issue?
Oh, I just kind of was more than happy to pick up where you just were. It seemed like you had a lot of points that were essentially the antithesis of whatever opinion I would have. So I'm pretty much willing to go on anything.
Okay. Well, let's continue where we were. That there is or is not an issue with racial profiling in the U.S. That police are uh, basically, even if they're not individually racist, that the effect of their policing is racist.
So is this a thing where for it not to be racist, you would have to have like 60% of arrests and interactions for whites, and then 14% would have to be black, and so on and so forth? Like, it would have to correlate identically with the demographics of the country?
I mean, ideally, but yeah.
I mean, whoa. I mean, that's so okay. So essentially, that leads us to a fundamental problem that you and I are going to have, which is equality of outcome. That's an
Ah,
equality of
yes, the
outcome argument
equality
at
of
the end of the day.
opportunity versus equality of outcome. Yes.
But I mean, that's what that is. You're essentially saying like we need equality of outcome with police enforcement, right?
I think that if you are denying that there is a disproportionate amount of policing for minority neighborhoods, particularly black people,
I'm
and
not.
okay,
But that wasn't the point. The point was I asked you, would it have to be broken down according to the demographic percentages of the United States? And your response was yes. So that's equality of outcome with regards to police interaction. I mean, that's fine. Like if that's your position, like I don't know, I mean, fucking, I'm not here
that's
to
my
convert you,
goal.
man. That's
My
your okay.
position
Well,
right
yeah,
now is that there is not an equality of outcome with regards to policing.
there never will be.
There never will be. Why not?
Why would there be?
Why wouldn't there be?
Because I mean, there's going to be differences based on socioeconomic status. There's going to be differences based on rural versus urban. There's going to be differences based on culture. There's going to be differences based on local law. There's going to be differences based on state
But
law. There's
why
going to be
should
differences
that?
based on
Why should?
patterns of enforcement. There's going to be differences based on patrol routes. There's going to be differences based on, I mean, fucking every like. I mean, it's just a you're attempting to take an infinite amount of variables and say they have to equal this number at the end. And that's, I mean, it's possible, but to do that would require measures that I don't think are beneficial long term.
Why not?
Okay, so if you, well, I mean, how would you do that? So if let's just say you, for
So what
instance,
if
you start
we
off and you're like,
ins?
we have, well,
What
hold
if
on, we have
we?
we have X number of cops, and you go, okay, well, we're going to take the national demographics, the percentage essentially, and we're going to apply the police force. I'm working through this. If I was trying to do if I'm trying to achieve your goal, my first step would be to take the cops and divide them up according to the national demographics. So 60% of the cops would patrol, white neighborhoods, 60%, 15% would patrol black neighborhoods, so on and so forth. That
Okay.
would be where I would start. I don't know how you would start on that, but that would be where I would start. And what do you do if the numbers don't come up? Do you establish quotas for your cops? Like what's your initial response to if that does not satisfy your understanding of reality?
Well, I would start uh, further back from dividing up cop patrols. Like I would work on
Okay.
the systemic issues of uh,
Well, that's ethereal, man.
what ethereal. If you let me
Like I mean
fucking
that's
finish,
okay.
if you by investing more in these minority communities, putting money into their schools, making sure that they have proper opportunities so that they don't turn to crime. A big issue in minority communities is that the only way many of these minority people have of making money and trying to get out of those impoverished areas is by turning to crime, either drugs, prostitution, um, uh, stealing, either like bank robbery or just ripping off liquor stores or whatever. That is the only solution they have for getting out of the poverty they're born into. If we instead,
You honestly believe that?
yes, if we instead invested in schools so that the schools weren't underfunded, so that there weren't 30 or 40 kids to a classroom, if we instead,
So do you think that they should all have tablets? Like, is this like a should
I,
we get all the, impoverished schools in Chicago tablets?
as one part of it, I
Do
think
you
that we
think
should
those
invest
tablets
so
would
that
survive?
they're, wow, dude. Okay. So if we invested in schools, not to give everyone tablets, but so they had up to date curriculum and textbooks, so that they could pay good teachers to stay in the area, so that there wasn't 30 kids to a classroom, instead it was like 15 or 20, by building bigger and better schools and hiring more and better teachers, then we don't have this situation where there's not enough kids for the teachers to properly watch them all. And yeah,
Do you know many teachers?
not personally, no.
Okay. I will tell you what teachers okay, so there's a mechanism in place for what you're describing already. And I'm going to drop something in chat. You can ignore it if you would like. But that's from my
Oh,
home
I didn't know
state.
you were a teacher, Magno. My bad.
No, I'm not a teacher. I'm just,
No, I was talking to someone in
I've been
chat.
alive for a long time. Um, oh, Mag Mill. Okay, so he should know about this. Essentially, there is a process by which if you go to, I forgot exactly what it's called, Mag Mill, if you're listening, there was a point at which in my life I was going to be a teacher. I wanted to be a teacher. I was going to do, math and science and stuff. So I went and took the praxis and I kind of got into that whole thing. But there is a mechanism by which if you are a teacher and you have student loans, which a lot of people who end up with, well, teacher, okay, professor isn't the same as high school, but the thing is, there's a mechanism by which if you go to a worse area, then your student loans are forgiven at a higher rate. It's essentially what you're talking about. It's a increased incentive to teach in an impoverished area. And they still don't go. And it's because the students are incredibly difficult to deal with. All right. It's
And
not
the
a
classrooms are overcrowded and they don't have the
yes.
resources they need. And the
Well, I mean, sort of. It's that's why I asked you about the iPads because there's a minimum amount of funding that is required for an education, and then anything beyond that does not correlate to an increased competency or increased test results.
So is your argument that the majority or all of the neighborhoods, including minority areas, meet that minimum threshold beyond which
I
there's
honestly don't know.
okay,
I'm not going to claim that they do.
okay.
That's not my claim. My claim is essentially that the 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 idea of just let's throw cash at it never works. And
Really?
then you have, yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's because, okay, I work in government and I can tell you they give us a budget. All government agencies work this way. You are given a budget, you burn that whole budget so the next year you can request an increase. You never leave anything in there. So
Right,
whenever
I'm
you're
aware.
throwing, yeah, so it's to just like literally burn cash on it. That's not an issue. I think a lot of these quote unquote systemic things that you're going to bring up, they're all, as far as I'm aware, and as far as people smarter than myself, I apparently you think he's a fucking hack, but I think Larry Elder is probably smarter than I am.
Oh,
For certain,
I'm not
he's
saying
more
he's
educated.
stupid. But I'm saying that he is an idiot in that he is denying data and reality in order to push his agenda.
So you claimed that based upon his citation of a racial statistics, according to Deloitte, which is probably one of the best data aggregation firms on earth. White alone residents in Chicago, 33%. Black alone in Chicago, 30%. Hispanic alone in Chicago, 29%. That is pretty close to one third, one third, one third. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
Can you post that link?
I mean, I already put it in there. It's datausa.io. It's a data aggregation engine powered by Deloitte, and Deloitte is the premier accounting firm on earth.
Where I don't see the link. Did you post it
I
earlier?
dropped it. Yeah, I dropped
Oh,
it
there it is. Okay.
back in chat. But you can essentially trust Deloitte. Like they have this information for essentially every metropolitan statistical area in the country. And then it breaks down like all this stuff. It's a really good source. Like if you're ever wanting to really get some good visualization of data, this USA or datausa.io is a phenomenal source. It's the visualizations
Okay.
and the different amounts of data and stuff are on here is really good. And it's extremely accurate because that's what Deloitte does. Like, that's the reason that they are the premier financial accounting firm on earth. But it goes into like poverty
Okay.
by race and it's got that stuff and it's got poverty by age and gender, which is always really interesting because you find a lot of people that are in poverty are in their mid to late teens, early 20s.
Okay. I will retract my criticism of him being inaccurate about that.
Well,
So
it's
yeah,
just,
this.
if someone's so Larry Elder in that clip that you had, like he's just firing stats. And that's the one thing I don't like about Larry Elder. He gets on this like thing and I mean he just like, slams through at such a clip that it's like, and I can't it's a I don't like that like the way that he does that, but he's usually pretty close. But when you're doing something like that, I try and give people a couple percentage points leeway. Like,
Yeah, yeah. No, this is close enough that I have no issue with his characterization of the third, a third, a third. Yeah, that's uh, this rounds off to that. So yeah, I was unaware that this, according to this data, that is accurate. So yeah, I have no issue with that. Um, so what exactly would your prescriptions be for improving these minority neighborhoods?
well, they're not. You're not going to be able to apply the same solution to a Hispanic neighborhood, a Black neighborhood, a Czech neighborhood, and an Asian neighborhood.
Why not?
They're all. I mean, why would you? They're different cultures. They're different people.
Okay. Do you think they
I'm
inherently
fat.
need different things than their that an Hispanic neighborhood needs something inherently different from a white neighborhood? Like as far as schooling and uh, crime prevention and that kind of thing? Do you think that there's some inherent difference between Hispanics and blacks and Asians and whites?
I guess it would depend on how what you would call inherent, but there are inherent properties of those communities that are different, or there are properties of those communities that are different.
I mean, yes, there are differences in culture, but do you think they're
Yeah,
that much different in the needs of
sure.
their children to
Yes,
be properly educated?
yes. How would they not be? So primarily Hispanic neighborhoods. I spent 2 years in Houston. I've spent 2 years in Dallas Fort Worth now. Primarily Hispanic neighborhoods and first generation immigrant neighborhoods. You have a serious problem with with the kids simply not being able to speak English. And there's an issue with that, whereas it retards the learning process and it increases the amount of cost. Hold on a second. um, but so it's essentially it correlates to, and it might be 45, it might be 55, it might be 40%, but a nearly 50% increase in cost to educate an ESL student. And it retards the process because you have to take time out of the curriculum in order to work on English. Um, the so the Hispanic neighborhood is going to have a different issue than the black neighborhood because black kids, fucking black kids speak English. There's no ESL issue, so you don't have to focus on that. That's not a problem. Asians children in primarily Asian neighborhoods like God, I think it is it Bellevue, Bel Air, Bellevue. I can't remember the area in Houston, this exact street, but there's like a Chinatown in Houston. All those kids speak English, so that's not that's not really an issue for those. Whereas it is an issue, for the Hispanic neighborhood. The black neighborhood is going to have more, as Isabel just pointed out, which is something that I wanted to get to.
Yeah, and the war on drugs.
Well, the black neighborhoods are going to have less fathers in the household than Asian neighborhoods are. Asian households and Hispanic households are going to be almost, they're going to have a higher percentage of true nuclear families than the black neighborhoods will. So those,
Right.
I mean, those are just issues that are different.
Largely due to the war on drugs,
Well, I mean, I'm not.
over
I don't want
policing.
to go down the rabbit hole of why it is. We're talking about education and how different neighborhoods, different groups, different cultures within America, different cultural
So if
enclaves
we're talking
are
about
going to
first
require different
generation
things.
immigrants, then
We're talking about education for
right.
children,
So
kindergarten
the
through 12.
needs of first generation immigrants and their children as far as education, sure, then we need to make sure that the early part of education includes an English uh, education part. That there's certainly ways we can
But
incorporate that.
African immigrants don't need that. Chinese immigrants don't need that. European immigrants don't need that.
That's because African and Chinese immigrants are disproportionately wealthier than
African
Hispanic.
immigrants are disproportionately wealthier.
Yes, because it takes money to cross the ocean as opposed to crossing the border.
I worked with a lot of African immigrant families in Houston for 2 years, and that's I mean, that's it's not the
Well,
case, man.
yeah, we've had a lot of African refugees in the last few years. That's true,
I mean,
but
it's not a wealth thing, it's a Africans in Africa, there are countries that speak English, and then Africans tend to use first I don't and this is something that I'm not I don't know, which is and I guess, maybe you have an answer for this, but for some reason, Africans, Nigerians, Ugandans, etc., they have an assimilation pressure. Like they still feel so when they come into and they immigrate into the United States, they desire to assimilate into American culture. And I guess it has to do with the fact that there's such a smaller proportion. Like even in African
yeah, they don't
immigrant
have
communities,
the enclaves of
right? Yeah,
natural or native, not native, but of their traditional culture that they can go into, like uh, Asians do, like Hispanics do, like yeah, that makes sense to me.
well, there might. I mean, there's got to be more to it because nothing is quite that simple.
Well, no, there's
Um,
obviously other factors as well, but I think that's a large part of it.
it probably is a large part of it. Um, but it's a thing that I would like to know more about. But anyway, yeah, the education thing, man, it's going to require if education is your primary driver,
I
then
think
you're
that
going
education is the primary way of reducing crime and creating better opportunities, equality of opportunity in America. And I think
out.
that if we spent more money improving the schools and making them better in these minority uh, neighborhoods and areas in America, that we would wind up with a better, we would wind up with better outcomes.
Probably.
Okay.
Um,
So,
I don't know. I think another problem that we have
because the
as
major
far as
issue with public schools in America is that they're funded by property taxes, right? So in poor areas, they have less money than wealthier areas, and poor areas tend to be minority areas, and not 100% obviously, but generally speaking, if you're in a poor area, that's a minority area. So the schools are funded by property taxes, have less
West
money,
Virginia would beg to differ, man,
right?
and Kentucky.
Okay.
and every other state that doesn't have large minority metropolitan statistical areas. Well, let me
Wait,
start.
are
As
you
far as, huh?
are you really arguing that poor areas tend to be more white than minority? Is that really your
No, I'm
argument?
just that poor areas tend to. I have no idea. I just know that there are some extremely impoverished areas that are predominantly white,
Yes.
specifically in Kentucky and West Virginia. I think the
Yeah.
poorest county in the country is like 80-90% white, and it's in West Virginia or Kentucky. Um,
Well, let's. Um,
but so here's the thing with the property taxes. Why do you think that I would want to pay increased taxes to pay for someone else's children's education when those people hate me because I'm white? I would rather leave that area than give them that money. If you literally get on TV every night and you're like, I hate white people, we're gonna burn this, fuck white people, fuck white people, fuck white people, and then you're like, we need your money to fund our schools. Fuck you. Your kids can just be illiterate for all I fucking care. So you're asking for help from people that you constantly demonize.
I
And
agree uh, that the fuck white people rhetoric is really bad, and they should probably avoid that. But
well, they should stop hating white people. It shouldn't be the rhetoric.
white
It's
people
not the
should stop
rhetoric.
hating black people. It's the
I
same.
think that I don't think that I don't think 20 years ago white people objectively hated black people. I think that in the past 8 to 12 years that has increased dramatically. It was not. It's not a Trump thing. I fucking guarantee goddamn to
No,
you
Trump
that
just
it's not
gave
a
people
Trump
the
thing.
excuse to go mask off about it. I've seen that in
I
my own
think
life.
I don't think so. I think that it was just the
No, I've known
timing
people
correlated.
who spoke egalitarian and were fairly, non-racist, and then in the last 3 or 4 years have suddenly started acting and using more racist uh, rhetoric and memes and what have you.
Yeah, but that correlates doesn't mean that it's causal. Doesn't mean that the relationship is a causal relationship. It just means that the events were correlated.
Thanks for the follow, Normal No.
And I mean, I don't know what the memes are, but you know, I don't know if that's necessarily a depiction as well. It's just I do know that the racial divide in America has gotten worse in the past 20 years for my generation. I don't know about fucking boomers, and I don't know what
If you don't mind me
generation
asking,
you
how
are,
old are you?
but 37.
Okay, so you're just a few years older than me. I'm 32. So
Yeah, yeah. I was kind of in that void between X and Y, or I guess
millennials,
now it's
yeah.
millennial. Yeah,
Um,
but I mean, it wasn't a thing, and I grew up in fucking Arkansas, like rice fields and cotton fields, old school South, and with my generation when we were coming of age, that 12 to 20-year-old range, like it was not a thing. And the same guys that I spent years sweating and bleeding with 5 days a week, I guarantee you I can go find them now, and it's just like fucking off the charts. you know my team is not your team. We don't identify as you know Arkansan or American, as white black, and that was not the case. Like, it was, your racial identity was like tertiary at best, in the mid 90s for my generation. Again, I don't know what was going on with the boomers because those weren't my social circles. But hold on, I got J Smash, whatever. You're a student and you're correcting me on Deloitte being premier over Ernst and Young. I take issue with that, man. Like, I gotta say, I take issue with that. I've been in the accounting field and that kind of stuff, finance field for I don't want to do the old man route, but like I take issue with that. You may be right. I'm still going to take issue with it.
So I'm just looking up impoverished areas and looking at demographics. So you're right. The poorest, at least the poorest two counties in Kentucky are 98 and 99% white.
Yeah, it's just
I mean,
rural areas, man. You
yeah,
get a town of like 5,000 people and they have one factory or one, wood mill, and then the wood mill shuts down and everybody is instantly out of like there's just no
right.
economic viability left. So I mean it's not a race thing as far as economics go. It's a, you've
No,
got
it's a class thing. You're talking to a
for the most
socialist here.
part,
I'm
yeah.
well aware
Yeah.
of that.
I
So,
mean there's cultural issues like you know, black people have a real cultural problem right now, and that's the deification of drug dealers and the white or not the white, but the single motherhood deal, and I mean that just makes everything exponentially more difficult whenever you don't have two parents to support children. There's a lot of
yeah.
people that would make the claim, and I kind of tend to agree with them that education begins in the home. Um, I've got a kid, and I can't tell you in the past 4 years how many, probably 10,000 hours have been spent with him reading and stuff, and we're able to do that because we have 2 parents. If I was a
Yeah.
working single parent, that would not be a thing, and I can't there's nothing that I can do. There's no policy that I can enact that's gonna fix single motherhood in the black community. That's a thing that, they're gonna have to
Well,
listen to their fucking grandparents and
from
just
what I've read and seen, again, ending the drug war would go a long way towards ending that because a lot of what happens, it's not that they've venerated single parenthood. It's that that is the only option because of a confluence of of circumstances lead black men to wind up in prison much more quickly and easily.
yeah,
So
well, I mean, sure, but that's the thing that I was gonna contest earlier where you said that essentially they don't have access to that, and I can't buy it because I know it's just
you
not
can't buy
sexy
what?
is the problem. Okay, so you made a point essentially that you can't it's different it's the black hole of the ghetto, that it's difficult to come out of that gravity well, and I agree with that, but the problem isn't I wouldn't say that the problem is so much like the systemic racism and all that kind of stuff. I would say that it's, single parent households are probably the biggest contributor to it. And then I would put a lot of weight on the culture
What about the
deifying
culture do you
the
think, because the culture is largely a result of, you know, Jim Crow was a generation ago. So we've got, you know, people growing up in these black neighborhoods who their parents lived under Jim Crow laws. We had, and that impacted how they interacted with society and how they were able, what their opportunities were growing up.
sure.
So this is why there's so little,
But
I
you
know it's a
can't you're
buzzword,
not gonna
generational wealth in these black neighborhoods is because they weren't able to build those up.
but you're not gonna convince me something that wasn't a problem when I was a kid is now a problem because of something that was prior.
What if I do you think I could convince you that you just weren't aware of it because of where you grew up because it wasn't an issue in your particular area?
Dude,
But now with
I grew up
social
in the deep
media,
South. Like like, I grew up in the South, man. Like, I mean, what you know I grew up where Jim Crow was, and it
right?
it wasn't like, it wasn't a thing. the poorest guy that I knew growing up was a white guy.
Okay.
Okay. The
And how many black business owners did you know growing up?
Well, see, that's an issue because I didn't, fuck, I didn't know many business owners, period. Like, I
Okay.
knew that my best friend had a family business, but I don't know beyond. I mean, dude, I was not a good kid. Okay,
Okay.
I wasn't like a good kid that knew everybody's families and did that. I was doing my own bad thing. Um, but I know of a couple. Uh, Yeah, I know of a couple. I still know well, I hadn't seen that guy in 4 or 5 years now since the last time I went home and ran into him, but, here's my thing with it, and this is kinda I've tried to get to this a couple times, but when I was growing up, that the cultural deification and the cultural worship of the things that you could call deviant had not quite manifested to its fullest as it has today. I know a lot of guys that worked just normal jobs, and that's the thing. If you look at it and you say, "I can do this, and I can make $1,000 tonight, and all it takes is some risk," or I can go do this shitty job where people are gonna kind of make fun of me, but it's a shitty job and it's gonna pay me a lot less, but there's no risk. In 20 years, I will have accumulated wealth. Most people, the your ability to
So
look
you
at a distant
realize
time
the
horizon isn't
difference in
mature.
wages between 30 years ago and now? That 30
Yes.
years ago
Yeah, there is.
wages were such that you could it was worse than it was 20 years before that, but it's better than it was now. So it was possible for you to get a job that would pay a living wage even if you maybe didn't have the best background. That's almost impossible today, particularly for black people, because
I
wages
would
are
say
so
I would
stagnant.
say you're correct with unskilled labor.
I don't
Um,
like that term, but what
well,
you mean, yes.
I mean, I don't know. I was unskilled labor.
Uh,
You think when
my
I was
issue
like
with the
16,
term
they called
unskilled
me skilled?
labor
Yeah.
is that it implies that what you do, like, it's typically used to refer to like jobs at McDonald's or things like that, right?
Yeah, it's unskilled
And
labor.
if you think that doesn't take skill, then you've never done that job. It may take less education and training
Have
than
you
other
worked fast food?
jobs. Yes.
I have too. It's unskilled labor. But my
Okay.
personal experience with unskilled labor was working construction, and I was
See, I
unskilled.
would
I
never
was
call construction unskilled labor
Well,
either,
never
but
worked construction. Um,
yes, I have.
no, you haven't, because if you've worked construction, you know that when you get hired on, I mean, maybe you started and you were a fucking electrician. When I got hired on to a construction crew at the age of 16, I didn't have any fucking skills. So the first thing that I got to do,
Right.
I
You
got to
you learn
sweep.
things, right?
I swept for like 4 days, and in between sweeping, they would say, "Hey, there's this fucking heavy thing over here that none of us wanna pick up. You come pick this shit up and move it over there." I was unskilled. I was there to burn my body for, $9 an hour or whatever it was. I was unskilled. You gain skill, but you don't start off skilled. And when you hire on at fast food, man, they give you like a simple narrow scope. It's like, do this one thing and I'll come back. After you've been there for 2 or 3 months, you have some skills. You can run this, you can run this, you can run this, you know how to do this. You could probably slot in for management when they're gone. At that point, you have skills. But when you hire fast food workers, they're unskilled. When I hired onto construction, I was unskilled. When I hired onto fast food, I was unskilled. When I started working with a fence company, I was unskilled. When I started my first job out of college, I was fucking unskilled. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I started my current job, I fucking would call myself unskilled for 2 years. It probably takes 4 to 7,000 hours in my current job before you have before you are proficient. So, I mean, it's unskilled labor. It may hurt some people's feelings, but it's a descriptive term, and it describes reality. You're not inherently skilled. I had this conversation with my cousin who's like 16, and he's like, "Oh, it only I've been working on blacksmithing for 3 weeks, and I think I've pretty much got it figured out." And I was like, "You're a fucking idiot." Then I went and found my aunt who was, worked at a high level, and I was like, "How many hours did it take you to become proficient at your career?" And she was like, "Probably about 10,000 hours." And I was like, "For me, it's 4 to 7,000 hours." And I looked at him and I was like, you don't even know what proficiency is after 2 or 3 weeks." But he's 16. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. But anyway, unskilled labor, it's not pejorative. It's just that's what it is. And oh, here's what I wanted to get to. If you don't have a good education, you can take a non-sexy job. You can start working in fucking McDonald's. You can work at Firehouse. You can do like my little brother who's half a retard, and he started as an electrician's apprentice, and like, I mean, he's making a great living already after 2 years. It's not, it's not sexy. There's no Bentleys, bitches, and big screen TVs when you start out on that. And that's a thing that if you watch these, I would say black people that the black community needs to fucking listen to. That's a thing that they talk about, and you can't. Not everybody's gonna make it, man. When you have a job and it's super sexy, but only 1 in 10,000 people don't end up in jail or dead at the end of the career path. I mean, fuck, you can roll the dice, but at some point, like, you just, and I can't do it. I can't. I'm not going to be able to convince those communities to get away from that. And you see people that do it, and they instantly get ostracized by a majority of the community for
Well, yeah, often because they go about it in a very inefficacious way, blaming the community for their.
it is the community's fault. People just don't like to understand that they fucked up. Like, I can tell you right now, I fucked up probably
Could
six,
it be
7
that
years of
they're
my
put
life,
in a
and it's depressing.
situation where their only choice was to fuck up? Where the reason why
No.
only a fraction of the people in a community make it out into these successful jobs is because of the situation in that community due to a combination of inside and outside factors, such as, again, education, the way that the options and activities that are available for young people in those areas, which is another issue. A lot of if you don't have community centers or after school activities or just good schools in general, then when kids aren't in school, they don't really have anything to do other than some flavor of crime. Uh,
That's why you need a mom at home. Not every
you
solution is
realize
going
that
to
the
be
nuclear
feel good.
family construction is about 150, 200 years old, and that prior to that, children were recognized as a communal
Nope.
thing? No?
Nope.
No?
Dude, I can probably pull up a list as long as my
Please
I'm not
do.
going to say that. But you can find monogamous pairs.
I wasn't saying anything about monogamy.
Right, but if you have a
I was talking
monogamous
about
if you have an animal that practices long-term monogamy and is not necessarily a social creature, then you have nuclear families. I mean, it's not a thing. I mean, it's I don't know how you're arguing that, father, wife, children is 150 years old. That's biologically millions of years old
that wasn't
at a
my exact
minimum.
argument. I may have misspoke there. What I was meaning was
Okay.
that this idea that it is up entirely to the parents to raise the children is not as old as people think it is. Family structures involving aunts, uncles, and other extended family, as well as neighbors and the community raising a child, was the traditional
Yes.
model for
Yeah.
millennia.
Yes.
Okay.
I agree, but I would say community was probably tertiary. It would have been parents extended family, and then community. But yeah, yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And you have, modern economic America has obliterated that. You grow up in one place where your cousins, aunts, uncles, and parents are, and then you leave for college. And then you have kids, and all that support structure is gone. You no longer have access to it. It's things aren't simple. Uh,
No, I'm well aware that that humans and humanity are incredibly complex, and how to fix them are incredibly complex. But it, there are some things, some simple things we can do. Simple being a very relative term here, that I think would help along tremendously. Like I
man, I
said,
mean, I
you
don't know
know,
how you solve. I mean, solving. I don't know. I
like I
think
said,
it's you
ending the
can.
war on drugs would do a lot to ending single
Oh, I
parenthood in the hood.
I agree
Uh,
wholeheartedly. I don't think that any drug should be illegal, but at the same time, I don't think there should be a safety net. So if you spend all week blowing cocaine and lose your job on Monday, then you should just starve to death. Like, I mean, that's the thing. You can't have both. You can't say like, "Oh, well, you can just do all the drugs you want, and then when you fuck up, society is just gonna we're just gonna save you." And it's a shit deal, but humans are fucking. We're God. We're deeply
why is it
flawed,
okay
terrible
that
creatures.
wealthy people, people who come from wealthy families, can fuck up two, three, four, five times and are able to recover? But if you don't come from a wealthy family, you fuck up once and you're in the gutter and you're going to starve to death.
Are
Why
you
is that fair?
asking? Oh well, life's not fair. Like, fair is a
But
place where they judge pigs, man.
the evolution of human society has been us introducing systems and programs to create more equality and fairness in society. I agree. In general, life isn't fair. It's
So
not fair that some people are born with shitty eyes, but we have glasses. It's
you're
not fair
wanting
that some people are born with shitty teeth, or, that their teeth grow in wrong, but we have dentistry. It's not fair that some people are born with asthma or diabetes, but we have medicines to correct those,
well, here's
or
the thing.
therapies for them.
Right, right. I get what you're saying. Here's what I would say to that. And this is essentially
I actually have
the
to log off here pretty quick, so we're going to wrap it up
okay.
pretty quick.
All
So
right, yeah.
just go ahead and finish what you're
So
saying.
I agree that support systems can be really good, but you can't spend 4 decades destroying support systems and then say, let's create a support system. We had support systems and they were attacked relentlessly by progressive leftists. You
Uh,
blew up the nuclear family, you made it so that you essentially had to move to large cities and you lost your support structure, and then they attacked the churches. And now they're
no,
like,
it
well,
was
fuck, there's no support structure anymore.
conservatives who attacked the social safety nets and support structures in that respect.
You think,
Progressives,
hold on, you think conservatives were attacking churches?
no, that's not what I said.
Okay, you think conservatives were trying to essentially disperse nuclear families? Because that's a pillar of the
No,
conservative. Okay, so
conservatives
then,
conservatives attacked things um, like uh, child welfare benefits, um,
right, yes, but
unemployment
that's
insurance.
right, yeah,
Uh,
but those aren't the social safety nets that I was just mentioning. The things that I was saying was
okay,
we
that's
had social safety nets that were not government provided. You had the church fucking 100 years ago. You can look at this. One really interesting thing, and it's kind of a sideways example, but it does provide a very sharp example. Have you ever heard of the penny auctions?
they ring a bell, and I think I probably know what you're talking about, but I don't know for sure. So,
Okay, so prior to now, I don't know. I would have to, someone more into history would have to kind of tell me when this dissolved. But communities used to be extraordinarily tight knit. And a prime example of this, to go beyond church, to go beyond extended family, to go beyond those things. During the Great Depression, there was something called the penny auction.
Okay.
And you can find a picture of the first one, and it's really interesting. So the Great Depression happened. The farmer had no money. Uh, the bank or whatever seized the farm and took it to auction. The
Yes, I have heard
entire
about these. Yes, the whole
Yeah.
community would come together and buy it,
Well,
and
the whole community would come together, go to the auction, and threaten to kill or beat the auctioneer or anyone
yes,
that bid against the family.
yes, yeah,
So
yeah. Now I remember where I've heard of it. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
so yeah, so essentially, I'm not the only point that I'm trying to make is communities used to be extraordinarily tight knit. And that's a great example of it. You
Mm-hmm.
have something that
Yep.
happened in the entire community. And I've heard examples of this from my family and stuff where, one person's farm, their crop would be ruined, and the entire community, because they had social capital between them, they have known each other for generations. Everybody would say, well, we're all going to pitch in. These people are going to give you a hog. These people are going to give you flour. So
So, do
we've
you think
had
I could convince you that it was the atomization of capitalism and the competition inherent in capitalist uh, economics that caused that rift between communities that prevents people from working together? Because that's really where it comes from. This idea that success is a zero sum game, and if I succeed, that means someone else has to fail, and if someone else succeeds, that means I have to fail. Whereas prior to this, I mean, even just as recently as the 1930s, the communities understood that if one person in the community succeeded, then that brought prosperity to the whole community, and that our this hyper neoliberal capitalist uh, mode of economics has changed the perception of community into this all against all.
possibly, but it'd be an uphill climb.
Okay.
I would think it would be more of an emergent property of scale than it would be necessary, because at that time it was still capitalism. It's just the scale was smaller. These were small communities. They were tight knit. Everybody knew everybody in a
Right.
town of 1,500. You know, the community is tight knit. You can know everybody. The Dunbar limit would stretch far enough for you to
Mm-hmm.
essentially, you're separated by your separation from everyone is like one degree of separation. But in a town of 8 million, like I live in now, the scale just becomes so vast that unless your community is an enclave, like we were talking about earlier, then you know I've I'm the only person that lives on my street that knows my neighbors. Like, I'm the only one. Like, when I went
Yeah.
and met all my neighbors a year ago, I was like, "Hey, I just moved here, yada, yada, yada." And I was like, "So, who lives on the other side of you?" And they're like, "I don't know." Like, "How long have you lived here?" "About 2 years." I'm like, "You okay, who
yeah.
lives across the street?" "I don't know." What the fuck?" And every single person that I went and introduced myself to, like, they did not know who lived next door. And it's just so I don't know. I mean, it may be a property of capitalism, but I would put a lot of weight on scaling versus
Well,
purely it being capitalism.
yeah. So you were correct that back like in the 30s, like we were talking about, it was still capitalist, but there was a lot more of mutual aid and a lot more of that community spirit that as these big uh, national or multinational companies came into town and essentially bought out these smaller, community owned stores and businesses and whatnot, that a lot of that community disappeared because you were no longer buying from your neighbor Jim. You were
I
buying
agree.
from,
I
yeah.
do agree with that 100%. And
So,
I've got a great example of it if I can get this out before you
yeah, go
you shut
ahead.
it down
I
for the
think that'll
day.
probably be the last meeting there. So go ahead.
So I've got, I grew up in Arkansas. I got a lot of family in Arkansas. I've got family in South Arkansas that they're big into the timber industry.
Okay.
And they spent 30 years in the timber industry in South Arkansas, continuously selling more and more. Okay, so 30 years ago in South Arkansas, there would be a dozen timber mills that were all very small, family owned kind of deals. And exactly what you were talking about happened. Like a gigantic, like Weyerhaeuser or Georgia Pacific would come in and they'd drop this lumber mill in, and you would have people that would sell their timber to the larger timber mills because they would offer them a penny more per board foot.
Okay.
We're talking about an insignificant amount of money in reality, but they would take their timber to the larger mill, the international mill, and over 30 years, every single small mill in South Arkansas has gone out of business.
Yep.
So guess what the result is? The mills now pay almost nothing for raw lumber, and every single person that neglected their neighbor to sell their neighbor the timber and keep their neighbor in business, every single one of those people now have spent years complaining about the fact that they can't get money for their timber when they are the people that allowed that problem to happen, and they allowed it to happen for pennies. And it's the same thing for shopping at fucking Walmart. Walmart comes in and everybody's like, well, I can get my eggs at Walmart for 9 cents cheaper. Fuck this guy who's had a grocery store for 100 years. And and it's this really difficult thing to, who do you blame? Do you blame the multinational company for coming in, or do you blame the people that are too short sighted to understand that, saving that money and maybe buying a new TV or some bullshit is, it's a short-sighted sacrifice that's going to eventually gut your entire economy, and it's just going to decimate your town. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a thing. You'd have to be more educated on people than I am
It is
to know it, but
definitely
I've
a
seen it.
very thorny issue and incredibly complicated. So yeah. But
Yeah, yeah. I've seen it several times.
yep. Hey, I appreciate you coming on. This was a very nice discussion. Uh, Much better than the one I had with the last guy. But uh,
Yep. Let me
so
shout out myself.
yeah,
This is
absolutely. Any social
Angkar.
media or whatever, go ahead. Pop your links in chat. Go ahead.
No, I don't have any social media.
Okay.
My job kind of prohibits social media and stuff, but
Ah.
sometimes I stream on here. And if anybody ever wants to hop in and chat, and I'm streaming, feel free to hop in. I don't care if you're a fascist or a communist or a Trump supporter or Biden supporter or anarchist or whatever. I don't ban anybody. So,
Okay.
man, it was good. I appreciate you. Thank you for letting me, come on and chat for a minute.
Hey, no problem. Maybe we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, I hope so. Have a
Yeah.
good one.
You too. Be safe.
See you, man.
Later. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to like, share, and leave a comment because it helps me. Subscribe and ring that bell to help you. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.